He poured boiling water on his 7 months pregnant wife. Not by accident, not in a moment of carelessness. He did it deliberately, methodically, while his mistress stood in the doorway, smiling, watching every second of his pregnant wife's agony. Kendall Medrano, one of the most feared mafia bosses in the city, burned her skin, scarred her body, tried to destroy her spirit, all to prove his devotion to another woman. He thought that would be the end of her, that she would disappear into her pain and shame, that she'd be too broken, too terrified to ever fight back. But what Brielle did next, what she planned in the weeks that followed, didn't just destroy his life. It dismantled his entire criminal empire, exposed every secret he'd buried for decades, stripped him of his power, his freedom, his reputation, and left him rotting in a federal prison cell for the rest of his life. And he never saw it coming. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Miami, Atlanta, maybe Australia, or Toronto. We want to know. 3 years ago, Brielle Mejia was 27 years old, working as a social worker for a nonprofit in downtown Los Angeles. She was dedicated, compassionate, and had her whole life built around helping people. She worked with families in crisis, helped children escape dangerous situations, and she was good at it. Really good. She wasn't looking for romance. She was focused on making a difference, on being the voice for people who couldn't speak for themselves. She was already fulfilled. Then she met Kendall Medrano at a charity gala, and Lord, that man knew how to command a room. The event was at the Beverly Hills Hotel, one of those black tie affairs where wealthy people wrote checks to feel good about themselves. Brielle's nonprofit had been invited because they were one of the beneficiaries, and she'd come hoping to network, maybe secure some funding for her programs. She wasn't expecting to meet him. Kendall walked into that ballroom like he owned it, and honestly, he probably could have bought the whole place without blinking. 6'3", wearing a custom-tailored black suit that probably cost more than Brielle's car, with diamond cufflinks that caught the chandelier light every time he moved. He had this presence about him, this dangerous magnetism that made everyone turn and look. He was talking business with city officials, laughing, that deep, confident laugh that seemed to fill the entire space, and when he smiled, it was devastating. Charming and lethal all at once. Brielle's best friend Maya grabbed her arm, squeezing tight. "Girl, do you see that man over there? That's Kendall Medrano. He owns half the restaurants and clubs on the west side. Word is, he's got connections everywhere. Police, politicians, everyone. And he's single." Brielle shook her head. "Good for him. I'm not interested." "Chilly. You better get interested. Men like that notice what they want, and if they want you, they get you." But Brielle wasn't thinking about Kendall Medrano. She was thinking about the court hearing she had on Monday, about the little girl she was trying to get into protective custody, about the case files stacked on her desk. She didn't have time for some dangerous man with a pretty smile and a reputation. Except Kendall had other plans. He found her at the bar 20 minutes later, appearing beside her so smoothly it was like he'd materialized out of thin air. "You must be Brielle Mejia," he said, his voice smooth and deep like expensive whiskey. "I asked who the most beautiful woman in the room was, and 3 people gave me your name." Brielle glanced at him, trying not to notice how good he smelled, like cedar wood and something darker, something dangerous. Did they now? They did, and I can already tell they weren't exaggerating. He extended his hand, and she noticed the tattoos peeking out from under his shirt cuff. Kendall Medrano, Brielle Mejia. She shook his hand, and his grip was firm, warm, possessive. "So Brielle Mejia, what do you do when you're not stealing the spotlight at charity events?" She almost laughed. The line was smooth, too smooth, but there was something about the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in that crowded room, that made her heart skip. "I'm a social worker. I help families in crisis. Nothing as impressive as whatever it is you do, I'm sure." Kendall's smile widened, and something flickered in his eyes. "Interest. Real interest. Smart, beautiful, and you actually care about people. I like that. Most women I meet, they hear about my business and suddenly they're asking for favors, wanting introductions, looking for what I can do for them. But you don't seem impressed at all. Should I be?" "No," he said, and his eyes got serious for just a moment. "Actually, that's exactly why I want to know more about you. You see people, really see them. That's rare. That's the kind of woman who could stand beside a man like me and make him better." They talked for 2 hours straight that night. He asked her about her work, her dreams, her childhood. He listened when she talked, really listened, nodding and asking follow-up questions like he genuinely cared. He talked about his own rough upbringing, about building himself from nothing, about wanting to create opportunities in communities that everyone else had given up on. He painted this picture of a man who was dangerous, yes, but dangerous for the right reasons. A protector, a provider. By the end of the night, Brielle had given him her number, and she went home thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd met someone extraordinary. The courtship that followed was like nothing Brielle had ever experienced. Kendall pursued her with an intensity that was intoxicating. Flowers arrived at her office every other day with handwritten notes. He'd show up at her apartment on random evenings with takeout from restaurants she'd mentioned wanting to try. He sent a car to pick her up for dates at exclusive venues, where everyone knew his name and treated him with a mix of respect and fear that should have been a warning but somehow felt like protection. 6 weeks in, Maya pulled her aside after meeting Kendall for the first time. "Bree, I need to say this. That man is dangerous. I don't mean exciting dangerous. I mean dangerous dangerous. You know his clubs are fronts, right? Everyone knows he's connected." "Connected to what?" "To everything the police can't prove but everyone whispers about. Organized crime, Bree. He's not just some businessman." Brielle felt her defenses rise. "He's been nothing but good to me, Maya. He treats me better than any man I've ever dated. He's protective and generous, and he actually listens when I talk." "That's how it starts," Maya said quietly. "Men like that, they're perfect until they have you. Until you're committed and isolated and can't easily leave." But Brielle didn't want to hear it. She was falling in love, maybe already in love, and Kendall made her feel special in a way no one ever had. When she was with him, she felt safe, chosen, like she'd been selected for something extraordinary. 3 months after they met, Kendall took her to his private estate in the hills. He'd filled the terrace with candles and white roses, and he got down on one knee with a diamond ring that took her breath away. "Brielle Mejia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are everything I've been searching for. You see the man I want to be, not just the man I've had to become. Marry me. Let me give you the world." She said yes without hesitation. The wedding came quickly, just 3 months later. It was held at a private estate in Malibu with 300 guests, most of whom Brielle had never met. Kendall's associates, business partners, people who watched her with calculating eyes. The ceremony cost more than most people earned in 5 years. It was extravagant, overwhelming, and felt less like a wedding and more like Kendall publicly claiming what was his. Maya came to the wedding, but she pulled Brielle aside one last time. "It's not too late, Brie. If you have any doubts, any at all, we can leave right now." Brielle looked at her best friend, at the concern in her eyes, and felt a flicker of something. Doubt? Fear? But then Kendall appeared, sliding his arm around her waist, and that feeling disappeared. "I've never been more sure of anything," Brielle said. That was the last real conversation she had with Maya for a long time. After the wedding, Kendall gradually made it harder for them to connect. He was never direct about it, but somehow Maya's calls would come at bad times, or Kendall would schedule something important when they had plans. Within 2 months, Brielle had stopped trying to maintain the friendship. It was easier that way, easier to just focus on her new life, her new role as Kendall Medrano's wife. She didn't realize yet that she'd just walked into a cage that looked like a palace. The first 3 months of marriage were beautiful. Kendall was still the man she'd fallen in love with, attentive and affectionate. They had breakfast together on the terrace overlooking the city. He'd pull her onto his lap in the evenings and ask about her day. They made love like newlyweds, passionate and consuming. Brielle felt like the luckiest woman alive. Then one morning, over coffee, Kendall brought it up. "I've been thinking, baby. I don't want you going back to that social work job." Brielle looked up from her phone, confused. "What do you mean? I'm going back next week. I've been on leave for the honeymoon." "I know, but I've been thinking about it, and it doesn't make sense anymore." Kendall reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "You're my wife now. You don't need to work. I make more than enough for both of us, for 10 of us. Why would I want you stressed out dealing with dangerous situations and broken families when you could be here, safe, focusing on us? Because I love my job, Kendall. I'm good at it. Those families need me." His jaw tightened slightly, just for a second, before the smile returned. "And I need you. Is that not enough? Besides, it's not safe anymore, Brielle. You know what I do, who I deal with. Some of those people have enemies. What happens when one of them decides the best way to get to me is through you? What happens when you're at some housing project, meeting with a client, and someone recognizes you as my wife? That's not going to happen. You don't know that. His voice was firmer now, the warmth draining out. I'm not asking, baby. I'm telling you. You're not going back to that job. It's beneath you now anyway. You're Kendall Medrano's wife. You don't need to be some underpaid social worker scraping by. That life is over. Brielle felt something cold settle in her stomach. Kendall, you can't just decide this for me. This is my career, my life. Your life is here now, with me. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. I've already called your supervisor and told them you won't be returning. I was polite about it, said it was a mutual decision. Don't make me look like a liar, Brielle. And just like that, he walked out, leaving Brielle sitting alone at the breakfast table, feeling like the walls had just moved closer. She called Maya immediately, but the phone rang and rang. She tried again an hour later. Nothing. When Maya finally called back 3 days later, Brielle tried to explain what had happened, but Kendall walked into the room and she found herself lowering her voice, making it sound less serious than it was. After she hung up, Kendall asked who she'd been talking to. When she said Maya, he nodded slowly. You know, baby, I've been meaning to talk to you about Maya. I don't think she's good for you. What are you talking about? She's my best friend. She's jealous of you. Of us. I saw the way she looked at me at the wedding, like she was hoping this wouldn't work out. People like that, they're toxic. They don't want to see you happy because they're not happy themselves. That's not true, isn't it? Think about it. Has she ever been supportive of us? Or has she always been trying to plant doubt in your head, trying to make you question me? He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. I'm not saying you can't talk to her. I'm just saying be careful. Protect what we have. Don't let negative people poison something beautiful. After that conversation, Brielle found herself hesitating before calling Maya, second-guessing what she shared. The calls became less frequent, shorter, more surface level. Eventually, they barely spoke at all. The isolation happened so gradually that Brielle didn't notice it was happening. Her other friends from work faded away naturally when she stopped going to the office. Kendall always had a reason why she couldn't meet up with people. I have that dinner with the investors tonight and I need you there. It's not safe for you to be driving around alone at night. I don't trust that friend of yours. The way she was looking at my watch, asking questions about money. Within 6 months of marriage, Brielle's entire social circle had shrunk to Kendall, his associates' wives who she didn't particularly like, and the staff at the house who were paid to be there. Then the criticism started. Small things at first. Baby, you've been home all day. Why are there dishes in the sink? She'd been managing contractors who were renovating one of the guest rooms, but somehow that didn't count. What do you mean you forgot to pick up my dry cleaning? What else do you have to do? The comments got sharper. You're wearing that to meet my partners? Brielle, come on. You represent me now. I need you to look like you belong in my world. She'd thought the dress was elegant, but she went back upstairs and changed anyway. One evening, she made his favorite meal, spent 3 hours cooking from scratch. When he came home 2 hours late, the food was cold. He looked at the plate she warmed up for him and pushed it away. This is dry. Did you even try? When she got upset, he sighed like she was being unreasonable. I work 16-hour days building an empire, and you can't even keep a meal warm? But I'm the bad guy for pointing it out? The affection became conditional. When Brielle pleased him, when she looked perfect and said the right things and didn't question him, Kendall was loving. He'd pull her close, whisper how much he loved her, make love to her like the early days. But when she disappointed him, when she pushed back or questioned a decision, he became ice. He'd sleep on the far side of the bed, wouldn't touch her, would give her one-word answers that made her feel crazy for wanting more. Brielle found herself walking on eggshells, constantly calculating what would make him happy or angry. She stopped expressing opinions that might conflict with his. She learned to smile and nod when his associates made jokes she found offensive. She became smaller, quieter, less herself. One night, she tried to talk to him about going back to work, maybe part-time volunteering. They were in bed, and she approached it carefully, trying to sound casual. I've been thinking, I miss helping people. Maybe I could volunteer a few hours a week at the women's shelter. Nothing dangerous. Just, no. He didn't even look up from his phone. Kendall, please. I need something that's mine. I feel like I'm disappearing. He finally turned to her, and his eyes were hard. You want something that's yours? Everything you have is yours. This house, Your closet full of designer clothes, your jewelry, your car, all yours. Because I gave them to you. You don't have anything that's yours, Brielle. You have everything that's mine that I choose to share with you. Don't forget that. The words hit her like a slap. She felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, not in front of him. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. You want independence. You want to feel like you're still that social worker who didn't need anyone. But you're not her anymore. You're my wife. This is your job now. Being here, supporting me, looking perfect, representing this family properly. If you can't handle that, if you want to go back to being nobody, the door's right there. But they both knew she couldn't leave. She had no job, no income of her own. Her savings account had been merged into his months ago because married people share everything. She had no car in her name, no credit cards he didn't monitor. Even her phone was on his plan. And sometimes she'd notice he knew things about her day that she hadn't told him. Places she'd gone, people she'd called. She was trapped, and the man she'd married had become a stranger. The cage had closed, and she hadn't even heard it lock. That night, Brielle lay awake long after Kendall fell asleep, staring at the ceiling of their bedroom in the beautiful house that felt more like a prison every day, and wondered how she'd gotten here, how she'd gone from being an independent woman with purpose to being someone's property. And worst of all, she wondered if Maya had been right all along. But things were about to get so much worse. Brielle discovered the affair on a Tuesday afternoon, and it was almost laughably cliché. Kendall had left his phone on the bathroom counter while he was in the shower. It buzzed with a text, and Brielle glanced at it without thinking. The message preview made her blood run cold. Last night was amazing. When can I see you again? Miss you already, baby. The contact name was just S, with a black heart emoji. Brielle's hands were shaking as she picked up the phone. She knew his passcode. He'd never hidden it from her because he'd never thought she'd have the nerve to check. The messages loaded, and there they were. Weeks of texts, intimate messages, photos that made Brielle's stomach turn, plans to meet at hotels, his downtown penthouse, places Brielle didn't even know he owned. The shower shut off and Brielle dropped the phone like it had burned her. She backed out of the bathroom, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. By the time Kendall came out wrapped in a towel, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to decide if she should confront him or pretend she hadn't seen anything. She lasted 3 days. 3 days of Kendall touching her, kissing her, making love to her while she knew he'd been with someone else. 3 days of feeling like she was going crazy, like her skin was crawling every time he came near her. On Friday night, when he came home late again, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, Brielle finally broke. Who is she? Kendall paused in the doorway of their bedroom, his jacket in his hand. What are you talking about? S, with the black heart. Who is she? Kendall. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then something shifted in his expression, and he actually smiled. Not embarrassed, not guilty. He smiled like she'd just figured out a game he'd been playing. You went through my phone. Who is she? He hung his jacket in the closet, taking his time, like they were discussing the weather. Her name is Shay Wilson. Her father used to work for me before he retired to Florida. Smart girl, ambitious, knows how things work in my world. Brielle felt like she'd been punched. He wasn't even denying it. How long? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. How long have you been cheating on me? Kendall turned to face her, and his expression was calm, almost bored. 6 months, maybe 7. I don't keep track. 6 months? Brielle's voice cracked. We've only been married for 10 months, Kendall. You've been cheating on me almost our entire marriage? I wouldn't call it cheating. That implies I was hiding something wrong. This is just how it works, Brielle. Men like me, we have wives, and we have other interests. It's not personal. Not personal? You're sleeping with another woman and it's not personal? He crossed his arms, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You need to calm down and listen to me very carefully. In my world, powerful men have options. They have wives for status, for legacy, for family, and they have women like Shay for other things. This is how it's always been, how it will always be. You're my wife. You have my name, my house, my protection. That should be enough. That should be enough? Brielle stood up, anger overriding her fear for the first time in months. You think I should just accept that my husband is having an affair? That I should be grateful for the scraps of your attention? What I think is that you need to remember your position. His voice dropped lower, colder. You don't work. You don't have money. You have nothing except what I give you. So yes, Brielle, you should be grateful. Because without me, you're nothing." The words hung in the air like poison. Brielle felt tears streaming down her face, but she refused to look away. "I want a divorce." Kendall actually laughed. "No, you don't. Because if you try to divorce me, I'll make sure you leave with nothing. The prenup you signed is ironclad. You'll get whatever I decide to give you, which will be exactly nothing. And then what? You'll go back to that tiny apartment, that sad little job helping people who can't help themselves. If I even let you leave the city without consequences. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality to you." He moved closer, and Brielle had to fight the urge to step back. "You're my wife. That's not changing. And if I want to see Shay, I'll see Shay. You can accept it and continue living the life you have, or you can make this difficult and find out exactly how much worse your life can get. Your choice." He left her standing there, walking out of the bedroom like they'd just discussed dinner plans. Brielle heard his car pull out of the driveway minutes later, and she knew exactly where he was going. To her, to Shay. Brielle collapsed onto the bed, sobbing into the pillows, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. She thought about calling Maya, but the shame was too overwhelming. Maya had warned her, had tried to protect her, and Brielle had cut her off for this man. This man who was now telling her she should be grateful he'd married her while he slept with someone else. She thought about leaving, just packing a bag and walking out. But where would she go? She had $300 in her personal account. Everything else was controlled by Kendall. She had no job, no recent work references, no income. Her family was 3,000 miles away on the East Coast, and she barely spoke to them anymore because Kendall always made it difficult. And even if she left, where could she go that he couldn't find her? Kendall had connections everywhere. Police officers on his payroll, private investigators, associates in every major city. He'd told her once, casually, about a business partner who'd tried to relocate to Seattle to avoid some trouble. Kendall's people had found him within 48 hours. "There's nowhere in this country you can hide from someone with my resources," he'd said, like it was something to be proud of. The next morning, Brielle woke up to find Kendall in the kitchen making coffee like nothing had happened. He kissed her forehead, asked if she wanted breakfast, told her he'd be home for dinner. The cruelty of his normalcy was almost worse than the affair itself. And that's when Brielle met Shay Wilson for the first time. She was at the grocery store, something she'd started doing herself because it was one of the few places she could go alone. She was reaching for organic vegetables when she heard a voice behind her. "You must be Brielle." Brielle turned to see a stunning woman in designer workout clothes, perfect makeup, long dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She was younger than Brielle, maybe 24, with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "I'm Shay. I wanted to introduce myself since, well, we're going to be seeing a lot of each other." Brielle felt her face flush hot with humiliation and rage. "You need to leave. This is a public place, honey. I can shop wherever I want." Shay picked up a mango, examining it casually. "Kendall's told me so much about you. He said you took the news pretty well, all things considered." "You're disgusting. Both of you." Shay's smile widened, and it was genuine now, but cruel. "Maybe, but I'm not the one pretending to have something I don't. You think you're his wife? You're a placeholder. A respectable face for the outside world. I'm what he actually wants, where he actually spends his time. You can keep the title, sweetheart. I'll take everything else." She walked away, leaving Brielle standing in the produce section, shaking with rage and grief. Other shoppers were staring, and Brielle realized she was crying again. Right there in public, her carefully constructed composure shattered by a woman who slept with her husband and had the audacity to mock her for it. Brielle abandoned her cart and rushed to her car. She sat in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the cage closing in tighter. She was trapped with a man who didn't love her, humiliated by his mistress, isolated from everyone who'd ever cared about her. She had no money, no options, no way out, and the worst part was knowing that Kendall was right. She had nothing without him. She was nothing without him. Or at least, that's what he wanted her to believe. 2 months after discovering the affair, Brielle missed her period. At first, she thought it was stress. She'd barely been eating, barely sleeping, walking around the mansion like a ghost haunting her own life. But when the second week passed and then the third, she knew. She took 3 pregnancy tests in the guest bathroom, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. All 3 came back positive. 2 pink lines that changed everything. Brielle sat on the cold tile floor, staring at those tests, and felt something shift inside her. A baby. She was going to have a baby, and instead of the joy she'd always imagined feeling, all she felt was terror. She was bringing a child into this nightmare, into a house with a father who treated her like property, and a mistress who mocked her in grocery stores. But then another thought came, quieter but insistent. Maybe this could fix things. Maybe a baby would remind Kendall of what really mattered. Maybe becoming a father would bring back the man she'd married, the man who'd promised to protect her and build a life with her. Maybe this was the answer she'd been praying for. She waited for the right moment to tell him. Made his favorite dinner, wore the dress he liked, tried to create the perfect atmosphere. When Kendall came home that night, actually on time for once, Brielle felt a flutter of hope. "I have something to tell you," she said as they sat down to eat. Kendall looked up from his phone, mildly interested. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." She smiled, nervous but hopeful. "We're going to have a baby." The silence that followed felt like falling. Kendall's expression didn't change, didn't soften with joy or surprise. He just stared at her, and then he carefully set down his fork. "Are you sure?" "I took 3 tests, all positive. I have a doctor's appointment scheduled for next week to confirm. But yes, I'm sure. And you want to keep it?" The question felt like ice water. "What?" "Of course I want to keep it. Kendall, this is our baby, our child." He stood up, shoving his chair back hard enough that it scraped loudly against the floor. "This is the last thing I need right now. Do you have any idea how complicated this makes everything?" "Complicated? We're married. Having a baby isn't complicated. It's natural. It's a trap." He turned on her, and his eyes were so cold Brielle felt it in her bones. "Is that what this is? You think having my baby will keep me? Will make me give up Shay and play happy family with you?" "No, I didn't plan this. I'm on birth control, Kendall. This just happened." "Nothing just happens, Brielle. Women like you think a baby will solve all your problems. Lock a man down, make him stay when he wants to leave." He grabbed his jacket off the back of his chair. "Well, congratulations. You're pregnant. But don't expect this to change anything between us, because it won't." He left, just walked out while Brielle sat alone at the table she'd carefully set, the food she'd lovingly prepared going cold, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach where a baby was growing, a baby that was already unwanted by its father. She cried herself to sleep that night, and Kendall didn't come home at all. Things got worse when Shay found out. Brielle didn't know how she'd learned about the pregnancy, whether Kendall had told her or if she had her own sources, but 3 days after Brielle's doctor's appointment confirmed she was 8 weeks along, Shay showed up at the mansion. The housekeeper tried to turn her away, but Shay pushed past her like she owned the place, her heels clicking on the marble floors. Brielle was in the living room, and she looked up from her book to see Shay standing in the doorway, arms crossed, looking like a predator who'd cornered its prey. "So it's true. You're knocked up. Get out of my house." "Your house?" Shay laughed, cold and sharp. "Honey, this is Kendall's house. You just live here, and not for much longer, once he gets tired of you." Brielle stood up, trying to find some dignity, some strength. "I'm his wife. I'm carrying his child. You're nothing but a mistress. And you need to leave before I call security." "Call them. They work for Kendall, not you. Want to know what's funny? Kendall told me about the baby before you even got home from the doctor. He called me on his way back from your appointment. Want to know what he said?" Shay stepped closer, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "He said it was the worst news he'd gotten in years, that he felt trapped, that he wished you'd just disappear." "You're lying." "Am I? Ask him yourself." "Oh, wait. You can't, because he's avoiding you. He's been at my place every night since you told him." "He doesn't want that baby, Brielle. He doesn't want you. He never did." Before Brielle could respond, Kendall's voice came from behind them. "Shay, what are you doing here?" Both women turned. Kendall stood in the entrance hall, and Brielle searched his face for anger, for some sign that he was upset Shay had invaded their home. But he just looked tired and annoyed. "I came to see your wife," Shay said sweetly. "Girl-to-girl conversation. You know how it is." "Kendall, tell her to leave," Brielle said, her voice shaking. "Tell her she can't just walk into our home like this." He looked between them, and then he shrugged. "Shay, you should probably go. This isn't the time. Not get out, not don't ever come here again. Just, you should probably go." Shay smiled, victorious. She walked toward the door, pausing next to Kendall to kiss his cheek right in front of Brielle. "Call me later, baby." He didn't stop her, didn't push her away, Just let her kiss him and walk out while his pregnant wife stood there watching. After that, Shay made it a habit. She'd show up at the mansion when Kendall was there, and he'd let her in. She'd sit in the living room like a guest, making comments about the decor, about Brielle's weight gain, about how pregnancy wasn't a good look on everyone, and Kendall would just sit there, sometimes even laughing at her cruel jokes. "Look at that belly already," Shay said one evening, when Brielle was 12 weeks along, her stomach just starting to show. "You're going to be huge. Kendall, you better prepare yourself. She's going to balloon." Kendall chuckled, actually chuckled, and Brielle felt something inside her break. "She's pregnant, Shay. It happens. Good thing you have me to come home to. Someone who still looks good in a bikini." Brielle stood up, tears streaming down her face, and left the room. Neither of them tried to stop her. She could hear them laughing as she climbed the stairs to the bedroom, could hear ice clinking in glasses as they poured drinks like they were on a date in her house while she carried Kendall's child. That night, Brielle locked herself in the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were hollow, exhausted. Her face looked thinner despite the pregnancy. She put her hands on her small belly, feeling the life growing inside her, and she realized something terrible. She was bringing a baby into hell, a child who would grow up watching its father treat its mother like garbage, watching a mistress parade through their home, learning that this was what love looked like, what marriage looked like, what family looked like. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't let that happen. For the first time since she'd discovered those 2 pink lines, Brielle stopped thinking about saving her marriage and started thinking about saving herself and her baby. Because staying wasn't protecting her child. Staying was condemning them both to a lifetime of Kendall's cruelty and Shay's torture. She needed a plan. She needed help. She needed a way out that Kendall would never see coming. And she needed it before her baby was born into this nightmare. But Brielle underestimated how dangerous cornered animals become, and she made the mistake of threatening Kendall before she had an escape route. It happened on a Thursday evening when Brielle was 7 months pregnant. Her belly was large now, the baby moving constantly, reminding her every moment that time was running out. She'd spent weeks trying to figure out how to leave, but every plan hit the same wall. No money, no resources, nowhere to go. She'd even tried reaching out to Maya, but the number had been disconnected. Kendall's doing, probably. That evening, Shay was there again. She'd been at the house 3 times that week, and Brielle was exhausted from the constant humiliation. Shay sat on the couch with her feet up on the ottoman, drinking wine while Brielle couldn't even have a glass because she was pregnant with Kendall's child. The irony was cruel. "You know what I was thinking?" Shay said to Kendall, loud enough for Brielle to hear from the kitchen where she was trying to make herself tea. "After the baby comes, you should get a paternity test, just to be sure." Kendall laughed. "Shay, come on. I'm serious. You never know with women like her. Maybe she was seeing someone before you locked her down. I mean, she trapped you with this pregnancy. Who's to say it's even yours?" Something inside Brielle snapped. All the months of abuse, all the humiliation, all the fear and pain and isolation, it all came crashing down at once. She walked into the living room, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "Get out." Shay looked up, amused. "Excuse me?" "I said get out of my house. Now." "Your house?" Shay laughed. "Oh, honey, you really don't get it, do you?" "Kendall." Brielle turned to her husband, her voice rising. "Tell her to leave. I'm done with this. I'm done with her disrespecting me in my own home. I'm done with you allowing it. I'm done with all of it." Kendall's expression hardened. "Brielle, go upstairs." "No. I want a divorce, Kendall. I can't do this anymore. I won't raise our child in this toxic environment." The room went completely silent. Shay sat forward, her eyes gleaming with interest. Kendall stood up slowly, and something in his posture made Brielle's survival instincts scream at her to run, but her anger kept her rooted to the spot. "What did you just say?" "I want a divorce, and if you don't agree to reasonable terms, I'll go to the authorities. I know what you do, Kendall. I know about the money laundering, the illegal businesses, all of it. I've heard your phone calls, seen the documents you leave lying around. I may not have been paying attention before, but I am now." It was a bluff, mostly. She didn't have evidence, didn't have proof, just fragments of overheard conversations and suspicions. But she was desperate, and desperate people make fatal mistakes. Kendall moved so fast she didn't have time to react. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You're going to threaten me? In my house? In front of Shay?" Kendall, you're hurting me. You think this is hurting? His voice was low, dangerous, and Brielle saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Pure rage. You have no idea what hurt is. You walk around here acting like you have power, like you have options, like you matter. You don't matter, Brielle. You're nothing. And you're going to learn exactly what happens to people who threaten me. He dragged her toward the kitchen, and Brielle tried to pull away, tried to protect her belly, but his grip was iron. Kendall, please, the baby. You should have thought about the baby before you opened your mouth. Shay followed them into the kitchen, and Brielle saw something sick on her face. Excitement, anticipation, like she was about to watch her favorite show. Kendall shoved Brielle against the counter and grabbed a pot from the stove. He filled it with water and turned the burner on high. Brielle's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Kendall, what are you doing? Please, whatever you're thinking, don't do this. I'm teaching you a lesson. His voice was eerily calm now. I'm showing you exactly what happens when you disrespect me, when you threaten me, when you forget your place. The water began to steam. Brielle looked at Shay, desperate. Please, please make him stop. I'm pregnant. Please. Shay leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and smiled. This is what you get, honey. You should have known better than to threaten him, especially in front of me. He has to prove himself now. He has to show me he's not weak, that you don't control him. Kendall, please. Brielle was sobbing now, her hands wrapped protectively around her belly. I'm sorry. I'll never mention divorce again. I'll never threaten you. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't do this. He tested the water with his finger, and apparently satisfied, he turned to look at her. You need to understand something, Brielle. You belong to me. This baby belongs to me. Your life belongs to me. And when you forget that, there are consequences. He grabbed her arm and poured. The pain was indescribable. Worse than anything Brielle had ever imagined. The boiling water hit her arm, her shoulder, splashed onto her back, and it felt like her skin was being ripped off her body. She screamed, a sound she didn't recognize as her own, animal and desperate. She tried to pull away, but Kendall held her in place, pouring the water deliberately, methodically, making sure it covered her skin. Kendall, stop! Stop! She was begging, screaming, crying, but he didn't stop until the pot was empty. When he finally released her, Brielle collapsed to the floor, cradling her burned arm against her chest, rocking back and forth. The pain was so intense she couldn't think, couldn't breathe. She could smell her own burned flesh, could see her skin already blistering and red. Through her tears, she looked up and saw them. Kendall standing over her, breathing hard, his expression cold and satisfied, and Shay in the doorway, smiling. Actually smiling, like she'd just watched something entertaining. You should probably go to the hospital, Kendall said flatly. Tell them it was an accident, that you tripped and knocked the pot over. If you tell them anything else, if you say one word about what really happened, I will make sure you never see that baby again after it's born. Do you understand me? Brielle couldn't speak. She just nodded, sobbing, her body shaking with shock and pain. Good. Shay, let's go. She's boring me now. They left her there. Walked out of the house together while Brielle lay on the kitchen floor, 7 months pregnant with burns covering her arms and shoulders and back, crying so hard she thought she might vomit. The housekeeper found her 20 minutes later and called 911. At the hospital, Brielle told them exactly what Kendall had instructed her to say. It was an accident. She'd been making tea and tripped. The nurses didn't believe her. She could see it in their eyes, but without her confirmation they couldn't do anything. They treated her burns, gave her pain medication safe for pregnancy, and told her she'd have scars for the rest of her life. Permanent reminders of what her husband had done to her, of how far she'd fallen, of how thoroughly she'd been broken. But as Brielle lay in that hospital bed, her arms wrapped in bandages, her baby moving restlessly inside her as if sensing her distress, something changed. The love she'd felt for Kendall, the hope she'd clung to, the faith that he might change all of it died, burned away just like her skin. And in its place, something cold and calculating was born. Not revenge, something sharper than that, something more dangerous. Justice. Kendall Medrano had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd shown her exactly who he was, what he was capable of. He thought he'd broken her, thought he'd taught her to be afraid, to be obedient, but all he'd done was teach her how much she was willing to endure to destroy him completely. The answer came 24 hours later, in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. Brielle was alone when the man walked in. She'd been drifting in and out of sleep, the pain medication making everything hazy, when she heard the door open. She expected a nurse, maybe a doctor checking on the baby. Instead, she saw a man in a dark suit, probably in his 40s, with tired eyes and a badge clipped to his belt. "Mrs. Medrano, my name is Marcus Torres. I'm with the FBI." He pulled up a chair next to her bed, his voice low and careful. "I need to talk to you about your husband." Brielle's heart started racing, and she instinctively pulled the blanket higher, even though it hurt to move her bandaged arms. "I don't know what you're talking about. I need you to leave. I know you're scared. I know you think you have to protect him, but Mrs. Medrano..." "Brielle, I've seen your medical charts. 2nd and 3rd degree burns on your arms, shoulders, and back. 7 months pregnant. And you're telling everyone you tripped and knocked over a pot of boiling water." He leaned forward, his expression gentle but firm. "We both know that's not what happened. I'm not talking to you without a lawyer. You're not under investigation. Your husband is." Agent Torres pulled out a thin folder from his jacket. "I've been building a RICO case against Kendall Medrano for 3 years. Racketeering, money laundering, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder. We know what he is, what he does, but knowing and proving are 2 different things. That's where you come in. I can't help you. Even if I wanted to, I don't know anything about his business. I think you know more than you realize. You've lived in that house for over a year. You've heard phone calls, seen meetings, watched money move around. You're smarter than Kendall gives you credit for." He paused, letting that sink in. "And right now, you're in a hospital bed with burns that will scar you for life, carrying his child, probably terrified of what happens when you go back home." "Am I wrong?" Brielle's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him to leave, wanted to protect herself by saying nothing, but she was so tired of being afraid, of being hurt, of having nowhere to turn. "Even if I wanted to help you, he'd kill me. You don't understand what he's capable of." "I understand exactly what he's capable of. That's why I'm here." Agent Torres opened the folder, showing her photographs. "Crime scenes, documents, surveillance photos of Kendall with known criminals. We can protect you. Witness protection for you and your baby. New identities, new location, financial support to get you back on your feet. But I need your help first. I need evidence that will hold up in court. Documents, recordings, testimony. Things only someone on the inside can provide. If he finds out I'm working with you, witness protection won't matter. He'll find me. He has connections everywhere. Not everywhere. Not in federal prison, which is exactly where he'll be if you help us build this case." Agent Torres's voice softened. "Look, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of victims of domestic violence. And I can tell you right now, if you go back to that house without a plan, one of 2 things will happen. Either he'll kill you, or you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you were dead. Is that what you want for yourself? For your child?" Brielle closed her eyes, and all she could see was Kendall pouring that boiling water, could hear Shay's laughter, could feel the agony of her skin blistering, and she thought about her baby, about bringing her daughter into that house, about watching Kendall teach her that this was normal, that this was love. What would I have to do? Agent Torres straightened, sensing the shift. "Go back home. Act like nothing's changed. Be the submissive, traumatized wife he expects. But when he has meetings, when he makes calls, when he leaves documents lying around, you document everything. We'll give you a wire to wear during important conversations. We'll teach you how to photograph documents without leaving traces. Slowly, carefully, we build the case that puts him away forever." "How long would this take?" "Weeks, maybe a couple of months. We're close, Brielle. We just need that final evidence to tie everything together, and you're the only one who can give it to us. And if I do this, if I help you, you promise you'll protect me and my baby?" "I promise. The moment we make our arrest, you'll disappear into witness protection. New names, new life, and enough money to start over properly. Kendall will spend the rest of his life in a federal prison cell, and he'll never touch you or your child again." Brielle looked down at her bandaged arms, at the IV in her hand delivering medication to keep her and her baby safe. She thought about Maya's warnings, about how she'd walked into this cage willingly, about how the only way out was through the very thing she feared most. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." Agent Torres pulled out a card and slipped it under her pillow. "This number reaches me directly, anytime, day or night. If you're in immediate danger, if something goes wrong, you call me. Do you understand?" She nodded. One more thing, Brielle. This is dangerous. Kendall can't suspect anything. You have to be perfect. No changes in behavior. No signs that you're working against him. Can you do that? Brielle met his eyes, and she felt that cold determination settle deeper. He thinks he broke me. He thinks I'm terrified and obedient. I'll give him exactly what he expects. Agent Torres smiled slightly. Good. I'll be in touch with next steps. For now, recover. Go home when you're ready. Play the victim. Because right now, that's exactly what he thinks you are. After he left, Brielle lay in the hospital bed, her mind racing despite the pain medication. She was going to do this. She was going to become an informant against one of the most dangerous men in the city. She was going to wear a wire, gather evidence, risk her life and her baby's life to bring him down. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was the most dangerous thing she'd ever considered. But what choice did she have? Go back and live as his prisoner until he killed her? Run with nothing and spend her life looking over her shoulder? No. Agent Torres was right. The only way out was through. When Kendall came to pick her up from the hospital 2 days later, Brielle played her part perfectly. She was quiet, submissive, apologetic. She thanked him for coming, kept her eyes down, moved carefully like she was afraid of upsetting him. "I'm sorry," she whispered as they drove home. "I'm sorry I threatened you. I wasn't thinking clearly. It won't happen again." Kendall glanced at her, satisfied. "I know it won't. You learned your lesson. That's what matters." Brielle nodded, her bandaged hands folded in her lap, her voice small. "Yes, I learned my lesson." But what she'd actually learned was something Kendall couldn't imagine. She'd learned exactly how much she could endure. She'd learned that survival wasn't about avoiding pain, it was about using pain as fuel. And she'd learned that the best revenge wasn't hot and impulsive. It was cold, calculated, and served with the full weight of the federal government behind it. Kendall Medrano thought he'd won, thought he'd put her in her place, taught her to fear him, broken her spirit completely. He had no idea he'd just created the weapon that would destroy him. The performance of a lifetime began the moment Brielle walked back into that mansion. Agent Torres had met with her twice more in secret, once at a coffee shop 3 towns over, once at a safe house where he'd taught her how to use the equipment. The wire was incredibly small, hidden in a piece of jewelry he'd given her, a delicate necklace that looked innocent but recorded everything within 20 feet. He'd shown her how to photograph documents with her phone using a special app that uploaded directly to a secure FBI server. He'd taught her what to listen for, what mattered in conversations, what kind of evidence would hold up in court. "Remember," he'd said during their last meeting, "you're not just gathering evidence, you're building a case. Every recording, every document, every detail adds up. Be patient, be smart, and above all, be the woman he expects you to be." So that's exactly what Brielle became. At home, she was perfect, perfectly submissive, perfectly broken, perfectly obedient. She kept her eyes downcast when Kendall spoke to her. She apologized constantly for things that weren't her fault. She moved carefully, slowly, like someone who'd been beaten down so thoroughly they'd forgotten how to stand up straight. "I'm sorry about dinner being late," she'd say, even when it wasn't late. "I'm sorry the house isn't cleaner, even when it was spotless. I'm sorry I upset you," even when she'd done nothing wrong. Kendall ate it up. He'd pat her head like she was a dog, tell her she was learning, that she was finally understanding her place. Sometimes he'd be almost affectionate, in that possessive way of his, pulling her close and telling her that this was how things should have been from the beginning, that if she'd just been obedient from the start, none of the unpleasantness would have been necessary. And Brielle would nod, would press herself against him, would whisper that he was right, all while wearing the wire that recorded every word. Shay's visits continued, and that was almost harder than dealing with Kendall. But Brielle forced herself to tolerate it, to accept it, to play the defeated wife who'd accepted her fate. When Shay walked into the mansion like she owned it, Brielle would simply lower her eyes and move to another room. When Shay made cruel comments about her pregnancy weight or her scars or her position in Kendall's life, Brielle would just take it silently. "Look at you," Shay said one afternoon, sprawled on the couch while Brielle brought her a glass of wine she hadn't asked for but expected anyway. "So domesticated now. So obedient. This is what you should have been all along, honey. Kendall's little housewife who knows her place." "Yes," Brielle said quietly, setting down the glass. "You're right," Shay laughed, delighted. "Oh, this is so much better. Kendall, you really did break her, didn't you?" Kendall looked up from his phone, amused. I told you. Sometimes people need to learn lessons the hard way. Brielle excused herself, went upstairs, and immediately checked that the recording had captured everything. It had. Every cruel word, every admission of what they'd done to her, every moment of their arrogance. She uploaded it to the FBI server and added it to the growing file that would bury them both. But the real work happened when Kendall had his business meetings. He'd stopped being careful around her because he thought she was too broken, too stupid, too defeated to be a threat. So when his associates came to the house, when they sat in his office discussing shipments and payoffs and territories, Brielle would find reasons to be nearby, bringing coffee, collecting dishes, moving through the background like furniture that no one noticed. The wire captured everything. The shipment from the port comes in Thursday, one man said. A heavy-set guy Kendall called Marcus. Same route as last time. We've got the customs official paid off, so it should be clean. What about the Gomez situation? Another asked. Are we handling that, or are we letting it slide? Kendall's voice was cold. We're handling it. Nobody threatens my territory and walks away. Make it look like an accident. I don't want any heat on us right now. Brielle's hand shook as she poured coffee, but no one noticed. She was invisible to them. Just Kendall's pregnant wife who'd been put in her place. They talked about murders like discussing dinner plans, about bribes like commenting on the weather, about criminal operations that would put them all away for life. And Brielle recorded every word. At night, when Kendall was asleep, Brielle would sneak into his office. She'd learned his computer password weeks ago by watching him type it, and she'd become an expert at moving through his files quickly and silently. Financial records that showed money laundering through his legitimate businesses, emails discussing bribes to public officials, documents that outlined the entire structure of his organization, names and roles and connections that spanned decades. She'd photograph everything on her phone, upload it to the FBI server, and be back in bed before Kendall ever woke up. Sometimes she'd lie there in the dark, her heart pounding so hard she was sure it would wake him, but he never suspected. Why would he? She was broken. She was beaten. She was nothing. Agent Torres checked in with her once a week, always carefully, always making sure they weren't being watched. They'd meet in random locations, never the same place twice. A park, 3 towns over, a grocery store parking lot. Once in the back of a church during a service Brielle pretended to attend. This is incredible work, he told her during one of their meetings, scrolling through the evidence she'd gathered. We've got him on RICO charges, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, bribery, extortion. This is everything we needed and more. You're doing amazing, Brielle. How much longer? Her hand rested on her belly, now 8 months pregnant. The baby's coming soon. Soon. We're coordinating with other agencies, building the net around his entire organization. We're not just taking down Kendall, we're taking down everyone he works with. We need it airtight so none of them slip through. Another few weeks, maybe a month at most. I don't know if I have a month. Kendall's been talking about the baby, about what happens after she's born. I think he's planning something. Agent Torres's expression darkened. What kind of something? I don't know exactly, but I heard him on the phone with someone, saying that once the baby comes, certain problems will be easier to handle. He might be planning to take my daughter and get rid of me. I don't have proof, but I know him. I know how he thinks. Then we move faster. I'll push the timeline. But Brielle, you need to hold on a little longer. Can you do that? She thought about everything she'd endured to get to this point. The burns on her arms that still ached, the humiliation of Shay's visits, the terror of living with a man who'd tortured her, the constant fear of being discovered. But she also thought about her daughter, about the future she was fighting for, about the moment Kendall would realize he'd been destroyed by the wife he'd underestimated. Yes, she said firmly. I can do that. 3 weeks later, Kendall announced he was throwing a party, a massive celebration at the mansion to announce his expansion into new territory, to show off his power, to remind everyone why he was the man you didn't cross. He wanted all his associates there, all the major players, everyone who mattered in his world. I want you to plan it, he told Brielle. Show everyone what a good wife you are. Make me proud. Brielle lowered her eyes submissively. Of course, whatever you want. But as soon as he left the room, she called Agent Torres. He's having a party. Everyone will be there. Every major player in his organization. If you're going to move, this is your chance. She could hear the smile in Agent Torres's voice. Then that's exactly when we'll move. You've done incredible work, Brielle. Now let's finish this. Brielle hung up and looked at herself in the mirror. The broken, submissive woman staring back at her was a lie, a performance so perfect that everyone had believed it, but underneath that mask was someone else entirely. Someone who'd survived torture, who'd gathered evidence that would bring down an empire, who'd played the long game when everyone thought she was too weak to fight back. The party would be Kendall's coronation, his moment of triumph, but it was going to be his downfall, and Brielle couldn't wait to watch him fall. The planning took 2 weeks. Brielle played her role perfectly, the dutiful wife organizing her husband's grand celebration. She hired caterers, arranged for live music, coordinated with security, and made sure every detail was exactly what Kendall wanted. She watched him strut around the mansion, talking about how this party would cement his legacy, how everyone who mattered would see him announce his expansion into a new lucrative venture, weapons trafficking. He said it so casually, like he was talking about opening a restaurant franchise. "I want everyone there," Kendall said one evening, reviewing the guest list. "All the families, all my associates, everyone who needs to see that I'm the one running this city." Brielle looked at the list and carefully made a suggestion. "What about the Moretti family? And the Santos crew? If you're really showing dominance, shouldn't your rivals see it too? Show them what they're up against?" Kendall looked at her with something almost like pride. "You know what? That's smart thinking. Yeah, invite them. Let them come and see what real power looks like. And what about Shay? Should she be here?" He considered for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, she should see this too. This is my moment." Brielle smiled meekly and added Shay's name to the list. She wanted them both there, wanted them both to experience what was coming. Every person who'd hurt her, humiliated her, tortured her, they'd all be in that room when the hammer dropped. Agent Torres had his team in place. Surveillance vans positioned around the neighborhood, agents ready to move on his signal. Warrants prepared for Kendall and 17 of his top associates. The net was drawn tight, and everyone was walking right into it. The night of the party, Brielle dressed carefully. An elegant black maternity dress that Kendall had chosen, her hair styled perfectly, makeup covering the exhaustion she felt at 8.5 months pregnant. She wore the necklace with the wire one last time, wanting to capture every moment of what was about to happen. Guests started arriving at 7. Black cars and luxury vehicles filled the circular driveway, men in expensive suits with dangerous eyes, women dripping in diamonds and designer labels. Everyone who was anyone in Kendall's criminal world, all gathered under one roof, all about to be arrested in the biggest coordinated takedown the FBI had executed in 5 years. Brielle moved through the party like a ghost, making sure drinks were refilled, that the caterers were on schedule, that everything was perfect. She caught sight of Shay arriving in a red dress that was entirely too revealing for the occasion, hanging off Kendall's arm like she was the hostess instead of his mistress. Brielle felt that familiar flash of humiliation, but this time it was different. This time she knew what was coming. Shay spotted her and smiled, that cruel smile Brielle had come to know so well. "Nice party, Brielle. Too bad you'll be forgotten 5 minutes into it. But that's what good help is for, right? Staying in the background." "You're right," Brielle said softly, lowering her eyes. "I know my place." Shay laughed and walked away, and Brielle watched her go, thinking about how that laugh would sound in about 30 minutes. She checked her watch. Almost time. At 8:30, Kendall called for everyone's attention. The room fell silent as he stood in the center of his grand living room, a champagne glass in his hand, looking like a king surveying his kingdom. Brielle positioned herself near the back, close to the entrance, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Kendall began, his voice carrying authority and confidence. "You're here because you're the people who matter in this city, the people who understand how real power works. For years, I've built an empire that spans across multiple industries, multiple territories, and tonight, I'm announcing our expansion into a new venture that will make everything we've done before look small." People leaned in, interested. This was the moment they'd all come for, the announcement that would reshape the criminal landscape of the entire region. "We're moving into arms trafficking. International weapons shipments coming through the port, distribution networks across 3 states, partnerships with suppliers that will make us the primary source for everything from handguns to military-grade hardware. This isn't just business, my friends. This is legacy. This is empire building." The room erupted in murmurs, some impressed, some calculating what this meant for their own operations. Kendall raised his glass, his smile triumphant. "So here's to the future, here's to power, here's to—" The front door exploded inward. FBI agents in tactical gear poured into the mansion from every entrance, weapons drawn, voices shouting, "FBI! Nobody move! Hands where we can see them!" The room erupted into chaos. Women screamed. Men reached for weapons they'd foolishly brought. Glass shattered as champagne flutes hit the floor. And Kendall stood frozen in the center of it all, his glass still raised, his expression transforming from triumph to disbelief. Agent Torres walked through the chaos like he owned it, heading straight for Kendall. "Kendall Medrano, you're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, bribery, and about 15 other charges I'm going to enjoy reading to you. You have the right to remain silent." Kendall's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape, for answers, for some understanding of how this had happened. And then his gaze landed on Brielle. She stood near the entrance, untouched by the agents swarming around her, her hand still resting on her belly, her expression calm. And in that moment, Kendall understood. "You," he breathed, his face contorting with rage. "You did this." Agent Torres snapped handcuffs on him. "Actually, she did. Your wife has been working with us for months, Mr. Medrano. Every conversation, every meeting, every document, she gave us everything. You bitch." Kendall lunged toward Brielle, but agents held him back. "You're dead. Do you hear me? You're dead." "No," Brielle said, her voice steady and clear for the first time in months. "You are. Not literally, but everything you've built, everything you've done, it's over, and I'm the one who ended it." Shay was being handcuffed nearby, screaming about lawyers and false arrests, her red dress disheveled, her makeup running as she cried. Several other associates were on their knees, hands behind their heads. As agents read them their rights and processed them one by one, Agent Torres approached Brielle, his expression gentle. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay," she said, and she realized it was true. She was okay. For the first time in over a year, she was actually okay. "We need to get you out of here. Witness protection starts now. There's a car waiting to take you to a safe house. You'll give your formal testimony tomorrow, and then we move you and the baby somewhere Kendall and his organization will never find you." Brielle nodded, taking one last look at the scene. Kendall being dragged out in handcuffs, still screaming threats. Shay sobbing as female agents led her away. The entire criminal empire that had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, crumbling in real time. "Mrs. Medrano," Agent Torres said softly, "it's time to go." "Actually," Brielle said, turning to face him with a small smile, "I think I'll go back to my maiden name, Brielle Mejia. That woman who walked into this mansion and lost herself? She's gone. I'm taking back who I was before all this." "Then let's go, Miss Mejia. Your new life is waiting." As Brielle walked out of that mansion for the last time, federal agents securing the crime scene behind her, she felt the weight of the past year begin to lift. The scars on her arms would remain, permanent reminders of what she'd survived. But they would also be reminders of her strength, her intelligence, her refusal to stay broken. Kendall had tried to destroy her. Instead, she'd destroyed everything he'd ever built. And she'd done it by being exactly what he'd always underestimated. Smart enough to play the long game, strong enough to endure hell, and brave enough to burn down his empire from the inside. But the real reckoning came in the days and months that followed, as the full weight of what Brielle had accomplished became clear to everyone, especially to Kendall. The trial was massive. Federal prosecutors brought charges against Kendall and 17 of his top associates, and the evidence was overwhelming. Every recording Brielle had made, every document she'd photographed, every conversation she'd captured, it all came together in a case so airtight that even Kendall's expensive lawyers couldn't find a crack in it. Brielle testified from a secure location via video link, her identity partially protected, though everyone in that courtroom knew exactly who she was. She sat in that safe room, 8.5 months pregnant, and she told them everything. The abuse, the affair, the boiling water, the threats, and then she detailed every crime she'd witnessed, every illegal operation she'd documented, every piece of evidence that would put these men away for the rest of their lives. Kendall sat at the defendant's table, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked small, powerless. The expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was just a criminal in handcuffs, and the confident smile that had once charmed her was gone, replaced by a permanent sneer of rage. When the prosecution played the recordings, Kendall's voice filled the courtroom, his own words condemning him. "Make it look like an accident. I don't want any heat on us right now. The shipment from the port comes in Thursday." We've got the customs official paid off. Nobody threatens my territory and walks away. The jury heard him discussing murders like business transactions, heard him ordering violence, heard him bragging about the criminal empire he'd built over decades. They heard Shay laughing in the background of one recording, encouraging him to teach that bitch a lesson the day he'd poured the boiling water on Brielle. The financial documents were even more damning. Shell companies, offshore accounts, money laundering schemes that stretched across international borders, bribes paid to police officers, city officials, judges, a network of corruption so deep and so wide that the prosecution had to use charts and graphs just to explain it all to the jury. Kendall's associates started flipping, one by one, taking plea deals in exchange for testimony. They confirmed everything Brielle had documented and added details she hadn't known. The body count was higher than anyone had suspected. The reach of the organization was more extensive. And Kendall Medrano sat at the center of it all, the architect of a criminal empire that had destroyed countless lives. The verdict came back after only 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was 3 weeks later, and Brielle attended in person this time. She'd given birth to her daughter Grace 2 weeks earlier, and she sat in that courtroom holding her baby, surrounded by federal marshals, watching as the judge prepared to hand down Kendall's sentence. The judge was a stern older woman who'd clearly seen enough criminals to be unimpressed by Kendall's attempts at remorse. She read through the charges, through the evidence, through the testimony, and then she looked at Kendall with something close to disgust. Mr. Medrano, in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a comprehensive pattern of criminal behavior. You have murdered, extorted, bribed, and corrupted with impunity. You have built an empire on the suffering of others. And when your own wife tried to stand up to you, you tortured her while she carried your child. You are a danger to society and a threat to everyone around you. She adjusted her glasses and continued. The prosecution has recommended life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and I see no reason to deviate from that recommendation. For the RICO charges, for the conspiracy to commit murder, for the money laundering, for all of it, you are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison. You will never see freedom again. The gavel came down, and Kendall's fate was sealed. He turned in his seat, his eyes scanning the courtroom until they found Brielle. The rage on his face was terrifying, even from across the room. His lawyers had to physically restrain him as he tried to stand, tried to say something to her, but the marshals were already moving him toward the door. Before they took him out, Brielle stood up. She adjusted Grace in her arms, walked forward until she was close enough that Kendall could hear her clearly, and she looked him straight in the eyes. You should never have given me a reason to fight back. Her voice was calm, steady, without a trace of fear. And she watched as her words hit him, as he realized that the woman he'd tried to break had been the one to destroy him completely. You're dead, he screamed as the marshals dragged him away. You hear me? You're dead. I'll find you. I'll find that baby. But Brielle didn't flinch. She just stood there, holding her daughter, until Kendall was gone from her sight forever. Agent Torres approached her, his expression gentle. That took courage. He needed to hear it. He needed to know that he didn't break me, that I'm the one who won. You did more than win, Miss Mejia. You dismantled one of the largest criminal organizations in the state. 17 men are going to prison because of you, including him. The other sentences came quickly. Kendall's associates received anywhere from 15 years to life, depending on their involvement. Several took plea deals and got reduced sentences in exchange for testimony about other criminal enterprises. The corruption reached so high that 3 police officers, 2 city councilmen, and 1 judge were also indicted based on the evidence Brielle had gathered. And then there was Shay. Shay Wilson was charged with conspiracy, assault, and participating in a criminal enterprise. Her expensive lawyers tried to argue that she was just a girlfriend who didn't know what Kendall was really doing, but the recordings told a different story. They heard her encouraging violence. They heard her laughing while Brielle was tortured. They heard her discussing criminal operations with knowledge and enthusiasm. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding her guilty on all counts. At her sentencing, Shay tried to cry, tried to play the victim, tried to claim she'd been manipulated by Kendall, but the judge wasn't buying it. She sentenced Shay to 10 years in federal prison for assault, conspiracy, and her role in the criminal organization. When Shay was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she looked at Brielle with pure hatred, but unlike Kendall's rage, Shay's anger was tinged with something else, fear, because she'd underestimated the quiet, submissive wife even more than Kendall had. She'd thought Brielle was nothing, was nobody, was just a placeholder to mock and torture for her own amusement. She'd been so wrong. 3 months after the sentencing, Brielle sat in her new apartment in a city 3,000 miles away, under a new name, with a new identity, holding her daughter Grace. The scars on her arms were still visible, still a reminder of what she'd survived. But they didn't hurt anymore. They were just part of her story now, part of the journey that had brought her here. Agent Torres called to check in, something he did every few weeks. "How are you settling in?" "Good. Really good, actually. I got a job at a women's shelter, helping domestic violence survivors navigate the legal system and find resources to escape. It feels right, using what I went through to help others." "That's incredible, Brielle. You're incredible." "I'm a survivor, that's all. Just someone who refused to stay broken." "You're more than that. You brought down a criminal empire from the inside. You're a hero." Brielle looked at Grace sleeping in her arms, at the peaceful life she'd built from the ashes of her nightmare. "I'm just a mother who wanted to protect her daughter. Everything else was just what I had to do to make that happen." After she hung up, Brielle walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere, in a federal prison cell, Kendall Medrano was spending another day of the rest of his life behind bars. And somewhere else, Shay Wilson was learning what it meant to be powerless, to be trapped, to be nothing. But Brielle was here, free, alive, rebuilding her life one day at a time with her daughter by her side. Kendall had thought he could destroy her. Instead, she'd destroyed everything he'd ever built, everything he'd ever cared about, everything he'd ever been proud of. And she'd done it all while he thought she was too broken to fight back. That was the real victory. Not the convictions or the sentences or the justice that had been served. The real victory was that Brielle Mejia had survived, had fought back, had won, and had built a life worth living on the other side of hell. And nobody, not Kendall, not Shay, not anyone, could ever take that away from her. 3 years passed like a dream after a nightmare. Brielle had chosen Seattle for her new life, a city as far from Los Angeles as she could get while staying in the continental United States. The rain suited her somehow, washing away the past, making everything feel clean and new. She lived in a modest apartment in Capitol Hill with Grace, who was now 3 years old and had her mother's eyes, but thankfully nothing of her father in her personality. Grace was sweet, curious, gentle, everything Kendall had never been. The restitution money from Kendall's seized assets had been substantial. The federal government had liquidated his properties, his businesses, his offshore accounts, everything he'd built through decades of crime. Victims of his organization received compensation, and as his legal wife and the primary witness who'd made the case possible, Brielle received a significant settlement, enough to never worry about money again, enough to do something meaningful with it. That's when she founded the Grace Foundation. It started small, just Brielle working out of her apartment, helping a few women she'd met at the local domestic violence shelter where she volunteered. She'd help them navigate restraining orders, connect them with lawyers who'd work pro bono, find safe housing when they had nowhere else to go. But word spread. Women started calling from all over the state, then from all over the country. Women who were trapped like she'd been, who had no money and no options, who needed someone to believe them and help them escape. Within a year, the Grace Foundation had a real office, a small staff, and partnerships with shelters across the Pacific Northwest. Within 2 years, they'd helped over 200 women escape abusive situations. They provided legal aid, financial support for housing deposits and job training, emergency funds for women who needed to run immediately. They connected survivors with therapists who specialized in trauma, with job placement programs, with resources that Brielle wished had existed when she'd needed them. By year 3, the Grace Foundation had expanded to 5 states and had helped nearly 1,000 women. Brielle hired survivors to work for the foundation, women who understood what it meant to be trapped, who could look another woman in the eyes and say, "I've been where you are, and I'm here to tell you that you can survive this." The foundation's logo was a phoenix rising from flames, and Brielle often thought about how fitting that was. She'd been burned, literally and figuratively, and from those ashes, she'd built something that mattered, something that would outlast the pain that had created it. Today, Brielle sat in her office on the foundation's 3rd anniversary, looking at the wall where they displayed photos and thank you notes from women they'd helped. Hundreds of faces, hundreds of stories, hundreds of lives that had been transformed because Brielle had survived and decided to turn her trauma into purpose. A reporter from a national news magazine sat across from her, conducting an interview for a story about domestic violence survivors who'd become advocates. The reporter was kind, thoughtful, asking questions that went deeper than the surface details. Looking back now, 3 years after everything that happened, do you have any regrets? Brielle thought about the question carefully. She thought about the woman she'd been at 27, the social worker who'd met a charming, dangerous man at a charity gala and thought she could be the exception to every warning sign. She thought about the isolation, the abuse, the terror of that night in the kitchen when boiling water had changed everything. She thought about the months of playing a role, gathering evidence, risking her life and her unborn daughter's life to bring down a criminal empire. I regret the time I wasted believing I could fix him, Brielle said finally, her voice steady. I regret ignoring the warnings from people who loved me. I regret not leaving the first time he hurt me, the first time he made me feel small. Those are real regrets, and I carry them. She paused, looking out the window at the Seattle skyline, at the rain that was always falling, always washing things clean. But I'll never regret finding the strength to fight back. I'll never regret becoming an FBI informant and gathering the evidence that put him away for life. I'll never regret destroying the monster he always was, even though it meant enduring hell to do it. Because if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. Grace wouldn't be here. And the 1,000 women we've helped through this foundation wouldn't have had someone who truly understood what they're going through. So the scars were worth it? Brielle looked down at her arms, where the burn scars were still visible, faded now but permanent. She didn't hide them anymore. She wore short sleeves, let people see, let them wonder. The scars were part of her story, and she wasn't ashamed of her story anymore. The scars are proof that I survived something that was meant to destroy me. Every time I look at them, I'm reminded that I'm stronger than the worst thing that ever happened to me. So yes, they were worth it, because they led me here, to this work, to this life, to being the person I was always meant to be. The interview continued for another hour, but that was the moment that would make the headline. Domestic violence survivor destroys mafia boss, builds foundation to save others. After the reporter left, Brielle picked up Grace from daycare, and they went to their favorite park. Grace ran ahead, chasing pigeons, laughing that pure, unself-conscious laugh of a child who'd never known fear, who'd never seen violence, who was growing up in a home filled with love and safety. Everything Brielle had never had with Kendall. Everything she'd fought so hard to create. Her phone buzzed. A text from Agent Torres, who she still stayed in contact with. Saw you made national news again. Proud of you, Brielle. You've done something incredible. She smiled and texted back. Just trying to make sure what I went through meant something. It means everything. You saved yourself, saved your daughter, saved 1,000 other women, and put away one of the worst criminals I've ever investigated. That's a legacy worth having. Brielle put her phone away and watched Grace play. A legacy. That's what this was. Not the nightmare of her marriage. Not the scars on her arms. Not the year of her life she'd lost to Kendall Medrano's cruelty. Her legacy was Grace. Healthy and happy and free. Her legacy was the foundation that bore her daughter's name. Her legacy was every woman who'd escaped because someone had finally given them the resources and support they needed. Somewhere in a federal prison in Colorado, Kendall was serving day number 1095 of his life sentence. He'd tried to appeal. Of course. His lawyers had argued insufficient evidence, claimed his rights had been violated, threw every legal challenge they could think of at the conviction. Every single one had been denied. He would die in that prison, old and forgotten, his empire dismantled, his name synonymous with everything ugly about organized crime. And Shay was in a women's federal prison in Texas, with 7 more years left on her sentence. Brielle had heard through Agent Torres that Shay wasn't doing well, that prison had broken her in ways that wealth and beauty couldn't protect her from. Brielle felt no satisfaction in that, just a distant sense of justice served. But mostly, she just didn't think about them anymore. They were the past, and she was busy building the future. Grace ran back to her, breathless and grinning. "Mama, did you see me? I almost caught one." Brielle scooped her up, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, feeling the solid weight of this perfect little human she'd protected with everything she had. "I saw, baby. You were so fast. Can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely. Anything for you." As they walked toward the ice cream shop, Brielle felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete peace. No fear, no looking over her shoulder, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just a mother and daughter on a sunny afternoon in Seattle, living a life that was simple and beautiful and entirely their own. Kendall had tried to destroy her, had burned her, broken her, tried to erase everything she was. But Brielle Mejia had risen from those flames. She'd built a foundation that would help thousands. She'd raised a daughter who would never know the terror she'd experienced. She'd transformed her worst nightmare into her greatest purpose. That was the real ending to this story. Not revenge, though justice had certainly been served. Not just survival, though that would have been enough. The real ending was transformation. A woman who'd been made to feel powerless, discovering just how powerful she could be. A victim becoming a survivor, becoming an advocate, becoming a force for change. Kendall Medrano had poured boiling water on his pregnant wife, trying to break her spirit. Instead, he'd forged something unbreakable. And that fire that was meant to destroy her? She'd turned it into a light that guided thousands of women out of darkness and into freedom. That was her victory. That was her legacy. That was her story. And it was far from over.